It's on.
Welcome to the new JFK Show, number 255. We're back for a new year, and we've got Larry Rivera with a killer hourglass that we're going to be using for time tonight. So tell us about your hourglass, Larry.
Can you see it?
Yeah, sure I can see it. Yeah. It's a beauty. It's a beauty.
Ah, there you go. I'm surprising you every day.
2 hurricanes and a move, huh?
Yeah.
All right.
Nothing keeps Rivera down.
All right, so from what I understand, Larry's got some more files. The JFK files were released by Trump. And many say there's nothing in there and there's nothing to see here. However, Larry begs to differ on that.
Oh, you're talking to me?
Yes, I am.
Well, actually, yeah, I think this is our first show of the year, right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, and we're just talking about how many have we done over the years. You know, it's been like sort of a record, you know?
Well, no, Black Ops on like almost on 1,000. So we're way behind. That's why we're the new JFK show.
Yeah, but qualitatively, there's no comparison.
No, somewhere along the line, they fell off the wagon and they've never refused to get back on.
Well, you know,
I think we can probably date that pretty precisely.
Yeah, I think there was a day when Fetzer left and DiEugenio entered the picture.
Yeah, for real.
Plunk your magic twanger, Froggy.
Right. That didn't take too long to figure out, but it's
Turn
amazing.
a truth-seeking show into a propaganda campaign, a charade.
Well, it's not,
a clown show.
Let's not forget that Oceanic himself has said many times that he's never been to Dealey Plaza.
Right. And the Zapruder film has not been altered.
That sure shows a lot of dedication, Larry.
Yeah, and Lee in the doorway.
That's a guy who really cares.
Yeah. So now we do have a problem, fellas. 153 News is not quite funding itself. They've been a couple $100 short. So Jason Boss put out a video today that if we don't make it this time, he's going to shut it down. He's going to leave it up for February so we can get our stuff off. But you know, I'm going to do my best to fund it. You know.
Gary, I gave him the perfect solution. I said you charge users $1 per video per year. He's got 40,000 videos. That's $40,000.
Well,
Why
I'll
did
get a hold of him. I'll talk to him tomorrow.
you tell him? I've talked to him. I gave him that. I interviewed him twice at length about this to promote 153news.net.
Mm-hmm.
Tell him there is the obvious solution.
Yeah, I'd hate to lose that, but we do have to think in the future about where we might need to put all these
It would be
videos.
a calamity. Gary, not only do you have all the new JFK shows up there, I have hundreds and hundreds of my shows up there.
I know. Yeah. I've got a lot of different shows. We got Raphael, you know, Nathan Lawrenson, you know, so I got a bunch of videos up there. Shows with you and I. So, all right, Larry, what you got for us as far as JFK goes?
Well, we're swiftly advancing here, you know, with the Mexico City documents and what happened in Mexico City, which I have been promoting and I've been saying here all along. I've been saying ad nauseum here that the new documents are going to redefine what happened in Mexico City. Obviously, at the time of the investigations, the Warren Commission and the House Select Committee on Assassinations, they were limited because in the first investigation, obviously they were being stonewalled by the CIA and the FBI. And on the second investigation, the CIA decided to do a sort of like a half-assed cooperation thing, you know, with the HSCA to sort of make believe that they were, but they really weren't. And fortunately, a lot of the new documents that have been released, which all you have to do is, you know, sit down and study them and read them and put them in the proper perspective, you know, in where they belong in this whole puzzle of what is known as the JFK assassination case, where they belong. And if you know where they belong, then you're able to advance, and go on to the next situation or subject or whatever. So in this case, we've already spoken about Sylvia Duran, and it's very interesting because I think we mentioned in the past that I know some people in Mexico, and they've been sort of like peripherally helping and trying to figure out what's the deal with Sylvia Duran, and it appears that due to all this situation with the JFK assassination, she is very well ensconced and tucked away and sort of like unavailable to researchers and to investigators. However, the more the more information that we glean, from the new documents, like I said, the more and more, we fill out this picture here on Sylvia Duran and what really happened in Mexico City, where it appears that, first of all, I believe that Lee Oswald that supposedly appeared at the embassy and the consulate at the Soviet and Cuban facilities there was an impersonator, doppelganger or whatever. And that seems to be more and more the case. And it's interesting because, and we've also talked about what the Lopez report that was written by Dan Hardway and Edwin Lopez in 1978. And we have also talked about what an incredible achievement this was because at the time in Langley, when they were trying to extricate all these documents from the CIA, they were only allowed to look at documents and take notes, but not to actually photocopy or anything. So the Lopez report, which is almost 400 pages long, and it has more than 1,200 citations from these documents that they just very briefly saw, at Langley at the time, for a period of about maybe a year and a half, is quite a feat, with the Lopez report. And in the Lopez report, they actually concluded that it was highly probable that the Lee Oswald that supposedly went to Mexico was an imposter. Okay, I subscribe to that. However, there's also a lot of new information coming out on how this whole sequence of cables and documents that supposedly came out of Mexico City were actually done after the fact. And we did some shows on the Lee Envoy, the wiretapping operation.
Yeah.
And we discussed, remember, we discussed in detail the reports of September and October, which were the 2 months, the end of September, early October, where Lee Oswald should have been in those reports and he was not. And so this whole thing, completely crumbles, when you try to follow, the exact protocol that the CIA station had for the Lee Envoy wiretapping, reporting the transcription of the tapes and everything. And then, then you have the assassination and you don't have a Lee Oswald on tape or in transcripts making these phone calls to the Soviet embassy and to the Cuban consulate and back and forth, that happened the weekend of, actually the September the 27th was a Friday, September the 28th was a Saturday, so that was a weekend. So anyway, this whole thing crumbles completely upon scrutiny, and especially now that we have the new documents that are coming out that are revealing more and more and more about what really happened.
So what you're saying, Larry, is they had such a massive surveillance program where they had warehouses with reel-to-reel tapes. They were surveilling every phone call that came and went, and not one of Lee Oswald. It's impossible.
That's right, Gary. You got it. You hit it right there on the head, and not only that, also ditto for the photographic surveillance. Remember, everybody knows about that image, those images of that husky guy coming out of the Soviet embassy. He looks like he's 35. He's big, it doesn't even look like Lee Oswald at all.
No. He's been identified as Walter Tabinski of a Toronto crime family. I mean,
Whoever he was, you know.
and of course, the audio recordings have also been shown not to be those of Lee Oswald, such that J. Edgar actually sent out a memorandum to all of his station chiefs.
The same weekend.
Yeah, announcing that someone was in Mexico City impersonating Lee Oswald. And I have made the point, if that's all you knew about the assassination, someone was in Mexico City impersonating Lee Oswald, and Director Hoover had put out a memorandum about it, you know the whole thing was a complete setup, a frame, and a fraud.
That's right.
All you knew, if that's all you knew.
Absolutely, I agree. And the thing is that you know, the more, you know, that we, you know, go into these documents, and more evidence, you know, comes out to support that, Jim. So it's just something, you know, that is like logic, you know. You know, the more evidence you get from a hypothesis, you know, it makes it you know, true. So, and valid and accepted. So. So anyway, what I have here, and we've probably shown this before, but I want to go to the screen share.
Yeah. So
because this is all
researchers, newbies out there. All of the Lee going to Mexico is just not true.
We've.
I don't know why all these researchers want to make you think that it is.
You know, I don't know why. You know. When you have, you know, first of all, consider the following. You know, when you have the situation where three consecutive Mexican presidents from 1956 through 1974, where CIA assets, okay, were in bed together with the CIA, all right?
All of them.
And when I'm talking about in bed together, where they, and we have discussed this before with the Lee Envoy wiretapping project, you know, where the Mexican government and their whole intelligence apparatus was working hand in hand with the CIA in these listening posts, where the Mexican, what was the take on the Mexicans? They were allowed to eavesdrop on the enemies of the Partido Revolucionario Independiente, which is the PRI, okay, and all of their enemies and all the communist organizations in Mexico, whereas the Americans were allowed, the CIA had eavesdropping, you know, facilities, and they had this going on, you know, with the Soviet embassy and the Cuban consulate, okay? So everything that went on in telephone conversations, we're talking about more than 30 lines, you know, they knew exactly what was going on. So the entire apparatus to transcribe and interpret and transcribe all this data and information was a big operation. You know, you needed a lot of people to do this. And in order to do this, they required the help of Mexican nationals, you know, and people who were working very closely with the Mexican nationals. So from there, you had to have your people from the station there in Mexico City, the CIA station, who would supervise and be the intermediaries and the liaisons, so that all this data could be then transcribed and interpreted, so that they could do whatever they had to do and do policy, you know, based on that information that was coming out. But coming back to Sylvia Duran, and it comes back to her because some of the new information is extremely interesting. And this is all part of the book, and we can go ahead and start it here.
Yeah, Larry, don't you think Sylvia's pretty hot?
At that time, well, she's in his almost, yeah, I guess so. She was like, you know.
Actually, more like a housewife.
Yeah, well, you know, I have to say that a lot of the bad things that came out about her actually were, it was all made up.
Yeah.
You know, and
she's an
the
innocent bystander in all this.
And the supposed witnesses that you know, said that she did this or did that, you know, did not have any credibility whatsoever. So
I mean, why do you think she really won't talk to anyone? I mean, it's still that critical This
Well, it's
far?
probably, Gary, it's probably because she's been so smeared in the press. I mean, it's a matter of aversion. You know, you're aversive to adverse stimuli. She's been subjected to so much distortion and falsehood. Not only was she a very attractive woman, but she was a very principled person. Larry has outlined the fact that she was of high moral character, and yet she's been portrayed in the press as though she were a slut.
Yeah,
I mean,
That's right.
there are good reasons why she'd want to avoid having a repetition of that kind of propaganda, disinformation.
And we're gonna cover something that has never been covered before here, Jim. And I don't want to, spoil it, for the audience, because we're gonna, we're gonna look at that now. But something that has never, ever, ever even been talked about. So if you want to go ahead, we can.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it, Larry.
Yeah, he's going to let you read, Dr. Fetzer.
OB, start here. Sylvia Durand, in her own words. All serious JFK researchers and students of the case know about Sylvia Durand, Secretary for Consul Eusebio Acaz. Larry, you can do those.
Eusebio Asque.
Asque, at the Cuban consulate in Mexico City, who allegedly had several interactions with Lee Oswald in late September of 1963, presumably even including a dalliance.
Oh, and that is so ridiculous. Yeah.
I know it, Larry. I know it is.
The woman, and later on, I found out that she didn't even drive. Her husband picked her up, dropped her off in the morning, picked her up in the afternoon, and they had a baby at home. They had family coming and going into the apartment all the time. So when the hell was she?
So, Lee's not the greatest looking guy. So you think that this lady's going to fall on her knees because Lee Oswald walked in the door?
No, but it goes beyond that, and we're going to see here.
Yes. Volume 3 of the HSCA contains a belated interview of Sylvia Triado.
That's her maiden name, at the time.
Triado, a portion of which will be reproduced shortly, of course. She never testified before the Warren Commission, but she knew too much.
No.
From day one, the arrest and mistreatment of Durand was viewed as a very serious matter by the U.S., as evidenced by this cable dated 23 November 1963, a month and a day after the assassination. The first two redacted words are an acronym for U.S. and another for Cuba. The last appear to be for the FBI and for Scott Curtis. Arrest of Sylvia Durand is extremely serious matter which could prejudice blank freedom of action.
ODIOC, which is the State Department.
Right. Freedom of action on entire question of probably Oswald responsibility, I bet.
No, that's P. Bruman, Cuba responsibility.
Okay, of Cuba responsibility. Yeah. With full regard for Mexican interests, request you ensure that her arrest is kept absolutely secret, that no information from her be published or leaked, that all such info is cabled to us, and that fact of her arrest and her statements are not spread to leftist or disloyal circles in the Mexican government, meaning anyone who actually wants to know the truth.
Yeah, they want to saran wrap this whole thing.
Right. We are trying to get more info on Oswald from blank, and will advise
That would be Odenvi. That would be the FBI. The cryptonym was Odenvi.
Yeah, good.
And then we'll advise or direct through COS, which would have been Winston Scott.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
The Cuban government was also up in arms about the arrest and mistreatment of Durand.
Of course they would have been.
Yeah. In a JFK assassination study, a local newspaper editorial dated 27 November 1963 will be presented showing the mood that prevailed between the Mexican and Cuban governments post-assassination. The newly declassified National Archive documents, which include memos and cables, truly describe the chaotic circumstances of her arrest. This chapter will also examine some of these, will reveal what eventually happened to her original signed statement of 23 November 1963. In an attempt to separate the wheat from the chaff, this chapter will also discuss in detail the two witnesses used to support an alleged Oswald Durand love affair, and will also dissect and analyze the Mexico City Cuban consulate Oswald visa applications, plural, because there are more than one. In the previous chapter, we also discussed the penetration of assets, Little M9 and Little Bill 7, Little Bill 9 and Little Bill 7 into the Cuban embassy. And this chapter will show how both these agents felt about a Lee Oswald visit to the Cuban consulate. Within days of the assassination, the Mexico City station, led by Winston Scott, appears to have been scheming its strategy regarding Lee Oswald's alleged Mexico City sojourn. In a previous chapter, cables beginning on 8 October 1963 were shown to have been of dubious authenticity, and the station personnel who originated these cables was discussed at length. After thoroughly analyzing the Lopez report, which was released in 1993 as a result of the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992, author Peter Dale Scott summarized the mayhem in the following manner: Deep Politics 2, page 20. With the new releases, the number of unanswered questions about Lee Oswald, the subject is now greater, not less than before. However, one hypothesis at the center seems more and more reasonable. This is that the CIA's files were being both fed and doctored in late 1963 to present a continuous flow of apparent evidence, always plausible but never conclusive, and above all, never true, that Oswald was a possible agent of Soviet or Cuban intelligence.
That's an incredible statement there by Peter Dale Scott, Jim. I think he really sums it up nicely, in that manner. I thought, and it's very important to introduce his summary there.
I agree, and given his formidable character
Absolutely.
as an expert in research,
Absolutely.
that's particularly powerful, yes.
Absolutely.
This alleged evidence was never at any time strong enough to justify an armed response against either the Soviet Union or Cuba. On the other hand, it was cumulatively enough for Lyndon Johnson by November 29, 1963, to persuade Chief Justice Warren and other recalcitrant leaders of the need for a Warren Commission. According to Warren, Johnson spoke of the rumors floating around the world that might lead us into war and possibly a nuclear war.
That was always, his way of intimidating.
Yeah, he knew how to manipulate. He was a master manipulator.
The master manipulator, exactly.
Completely brilliant that way. When Edwin Lopez and Dan Hardaway finished the HSCA Lopez report in 1978, they found a high degree of probability that Lee had been impersonated in phone calls and appearances at the Cuban consulate and Soviet embassy in his quest for a transit visa to travel to the Soviet Union. All you have to do is look at a photo of the guy down there compared to Lee, and it's obvious.
And not only that, when the transcribers, Russian couple, and we've talked about them before, Boris and Ann Tarasov, when they were visited by the HSCA in 1976 by Bruton and Blackmer, who at that time, were working for the HSCA, they said, flat out that it was, they couldn't, that was not Lee, in those tape recordings,
Cables tell the story. The following CIA cable dated 27 November 1963 reveals the extent to which the FBI exerted its influence in the Mexico City aspect of setting Lee Oswald up for the fall. It also shows the intimate relationship that existed between the Mexican government and the U.S. intelligence apparatus. In this cable, the redaction of the cryptonyms were not obscured sufficiently, giving us the ability to see through and reconstruct the cable as it was in its original form. These have been removed and the corrected terms have been inserted and the cable transcribed entirely.
This is what I'm talking about, and this is what, as you can see, originally when this cable was released, it was heavily redacted. Le Envoy, Le Tenzer, Le Tempo. Obviously, when you at first glance you can't really tell. You can't even make heads or tails about what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah.
But once you insert the correct terms, okay, and I'm going to scroll down here, and now it takes on a whole new meaning, Jim and Gary.
Okay, very good. One, Department of Justice is preparing a report on whole assassination case and will undoubtedly want to include detailed data on Oswald's activities in Mexico. Obviously, the Lee Envoy joint wiretap operation info as such cannot be used, but the statements of Sylvia Duran, which carry essentially the same import, could be used without compromising Mexico sources or revealing the extent of your liaison. Therefore, request you cable in a translated version of her statements and obtain Litensor equals Adolfo Lopez
Who at the
Mateos.
time was president of Mexico, okay, Lieutenant.
Wow.
Yeah, nice. And Tempo 2, Gustavo Diaz Ordaz.
Who is the individual who succeeded Lopez Mateos?
Wow. So you got two Mexican presidents here.
Exactly.
Yeah, permission to use these statements in the official report will coincidentally be published. Please notice that Director Odenvi equals FBI J. Edgar Hoover is getting from Odenvi equals FBI Mexico much info which obviously originates with the Lee Envoy operation. Odenvi FBI here apparently does not realize this information was produced by a Kubar CIA operation, and indeed, Odenvi FBI may be getting this Lee Envoy info through its own clandestine sources in the Gobernacion or even the president's office. Please try to clarify the Odenvi FBI representative there has the exact manner in which he has obtained such information and the form in which he has sent it to Odenvi FBI headquarters. We must avoid the inadvertent compromise of Lee Envoy. Advise.
This is a very, very telling.
I think they had an epiphany. So they had to use Sylvia to cover for their contacts and their sources.
Yeah, exactly. What they want to do is they want to keep their
narrative going.
They want to keep all the raps on the Lee Envoy joint wiretap operation, hush hush, you know, and you know, keep that out of the picture and rely just on what Sylvia Duran could have said, you know. But in this whole scheme, you know, what happens is that Sylvia Duran says, "Hell no, I'm not going to go with this shit," you know. And that's where this whole thing unravels in a way that we've never seen before, because we're looking at these cables now, Jim and Gary, and you know, it's like I said, you know, before, how could you formulate an opinion of what happened in Mexico City when you didn't even have not even 10% of the information, you know, from the documents? You know, now we have that whole 90% that we did not have. So it has to be completely, and I'm saying this, I've been saying this, you know, for probably a couple of years now, you know, since they came out. The whole thing in Mexico City has to be completely reformulated, you know, as far as I'm concerned, you know, based on, you know, all these new documents that are coming out. So anyway.
You skipped the second paragraph, Larry. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, you did. Okay.
Yeah. 2, please note that Director Odenvi FBI J. Edgar Hoover is getting from Odenvi FBI Mexico what information which obviously, did I already read that?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, you got it.
But notice here in this cable how Ed Edgar Hoover is involved, okay? The presidents of Mexico here are involved. Obviously, when Scott is involved in this whole thing, this is, and notice the date of this is November 27th, 1963. This is a date of the second Sylvia Duran, where they, you know, actually they, for lack of a better word, kidnapped her, you know, the police there, and made her come a second time, because apparently the first time she did not give them, you know, the information that they wanted to hear. Okay, or and another thing, and we're going to see it now because I don't want to give it away, regarding the original statement and affidavit signed on, taken on the weekend of the assassination, specifically on November the 23rd. Okay, and so these are the cryptonyms. Okay, and here's another very, very interesting cable that came out in the 2017-2018 document release, and it made its belated appearance with 2 references still redacted. I'm sorry, this is, Lee Envoy in the president's office. Those are from up here. Now, this is another one here that is definitely worth, see, this is the cable that came out. This is the same one from above here, see? Without the redactions. And here, the bottom, only these two redactions are here. But what I want to do is I want to continue here, right here.
Okay.
What does
this cable suggest? As seen in a previous chapter, the Lee Envoy project was a joint Mexico and CIA wiretapping operation which targeted the Soviet and Cuban embassies, as well as selected adversaries of the Mexican government, which at the time was dominated by the PRA, Partido Revolucionario
Institucional.
yeah, party. The need to include Lee Oswald's supposed activities in Mexico City was a cornerstone in establishing his communist ties and desire of the conspirators to lay this at the door, really the foot of Fidel Castro, which in turn would elicit a vigorous U.S. retaliation, which would include an invasion of Cuba. Several key entities perceived as Kennedy enemies would not have minded seeing this happen, to wit, the military, the mafia, the anti-Castro Cuban exiles, and the multinational corporations whose assets have been confiscated by the new Castro regime. That would include United Fruit and Anaconda.
Many. The list is endless.
Casinos.
Pepsi-Cola, Coca-Cola, you name it.
Tape recordings of Oswald requesting information with visas with Soviet and Cuban personnel would serve nicely to support this scenario. Ditto with photographic evidence. As discussed earlier, this book, Project Liempty, was Lee Envoy's photographic counterpart, and the images that were submitted by the Mexico City station were quickly dismissed as not being of Lee Oswald. It turned out these photographs were not released until almost a year after the assassination. The cable also suggests the FBI was much better informed about Mexico City and the CIA's secret operation than has been shown in the past via its own clandestine sources in the Mexican government, which was overseen by their own representative there. When the HSCA interviewed David Atlee Phillips, he did not discount the possibility that Duran might have been working for the CIA, because he stated that all embassy employees had been pitched in one way or another. Therefore, one last item to consider would have to be the possibility that Sylvia Duran might have been a CIA asset who was in on this from the beginning. In the previous chapter, we discussed the penetration of asset Leadmill 9 and Leadmill 9 and Leadmill 7 into the Cuban embassy, which gave the CIA Mexico City station unprecedented access to inside information there. It should then not surprise researchers and historians if it turned out that Duran was part of the scheme to place Lee Oswald at the consulate applying for a visa in late September 1963.
All we're doing here is just, laying out all the possibilities, Jim,
because we know better about her role. These next two confounding cables inexorably show that early on the Mexico City station was puzzled regarding a Lee Oswald Mexico trips.
Again, in the whole thing, the whole JFK assassination case, it seems like the very first reactions that came out, okay, and the very first things that were published and the very first things that came out on radio and TV seem to have been the truth, and that's what really gets me about this case, and then little by little, they just kept
chipping away, replacing one true statement with a false one until they have a whole edifice of nothing but false claims.
Exactly. So this is from R.L. Easby. We're gonna.
You want me to read this? Complete recheck photos all visitors to Cuban embassy August through first half November against good press photos shows no evidence Oswald visit. Similar blank against all Soviet photos from 1 September. Note, only visit we know he made was Cuban embassy 28 September Saturday, on which embassy closed, and we have not had coverage.
That's a lot of crap, because how can they even know that he was there when they had absolutely no proof?
Right, when it was closed. In future, we will require at least half-day photo coverage, both.
Oh yeah, they're covering their ass. Yeah, okay, wait a minute, we screwed up, but next time,
Yeah. 2, check manifests all planes arriving Mexico Central Airport from U.S. fails to show Oswald arrival under any likely variant of his name. passing this info.
Government of Mexico.
Yeah, GOM, right, okay. Asking they check border airports from which Oswald might have flown Mexico City. We do not get manifest these domestic flights. Let me say, Larry, Judith may be the plug to push the idea that Oswald traveled there by bus. So of course he wouldn't showed up on the check of the
Exactly. And now what we're seeing here is that, wait a minute, and this is something that's never been discussed before. Wait a minute, what about if he flew in, and forget about all this bus.
But he flew in on a private plane rather than commercial.
Absolutely.
But it's all bullshit anyway.
Yeah.
The second cable,
it's plausible denial. Is what they're doing.
the second cable suggests that in the absence of any photographic evidence of an Oswald visit, Plan B should kick into gear, and this would involve Sylvia Duran, where she immediately was rendered incommunicado to prevent the wrong, unfiltered information from being put out. Right.
And that's exactly what we see here in this cable, and it's dated the 23rd of November. Okay, and it starts here.
Saw photos of Lee Oswald on television night of 22 November, and obviously photos sent to Dallas were not identical with Lee Oswald held Dallas. Dates are as given on photos, meaning the photos taken in Mexico City were not the same as the photos from Dallas. Mexi station.
No, and notice that they know that they have these photos on November the 23rd, Jim, and when they were finally made public, almost a year later, October of 1964.
Yeah, and of course they're obviously not Lee Oswald.
Yeah, they kept holding it, and apparently, and I've read some passages where that was one of the major blunders of the CIA, even talking about that those photos existed, or that
Right. So where are they? Right. Where are they?
They would have been better off.
Are they lying now, or are they lying then?
Yeah, they would have been better off to say, hey, we don't have anything. Period.
Right. Mexi station reviewing all available photos, persons entering Soviet and Cuban embassy. Mexi suggests to Tempo 2 that Sylvia Duran, who Mexican employee at Cuban embassy and who put Lee Oswald on phone from Cuban embassy to talk to Soviet embassy on 26 September, be arrested immediately and held incommunicado until she gives all details of Oswald known to her. That's really to silence her and get her out of the media, I think.
And notice that Mexic means Mexico Station, the COS, is suggesting, but really is telling Tempo 2, who is Ordaz, the guy that succeeded Lopez Mateos, that, hey, we're not suggesting, we're telling you,
telling you to arrest her, to get her away from any communication with any news source.
Yeah, because why would that be? Obviously,
she might tell the truth.
Because they're using her as a conduit to spread falsehoods that she would deny.
And they want to keep her on the wraps until they can formulate what it is, the official version of what the hell they're going to say.
Yeah, how they're going to use her and what they're going to attribute to
her. Right, exactly.
The frenzy that the Duran affair created in Mexico and Cuba can be appreciated in this vintage editorial published by the Mexican newspaper El Informador.
Yeah.
The editorial reported both the Mexican and Cuban governments to have been in a very precarious situation, where one was accusing the other of meddling in the affairs of the other, exactly the type of dispute the CIA wanted to provoke. The false flag operation mentioned in a previous chapter, which would cause a break in their diplomatic relationship.
Remember when we did a couple of shows where, they were placing like car bombs under the cars, of people that worked at the Cuban facility, embassy and consulate, people who they thought were agents.
Not nice, Larry.
Yeah, and not only that, where even one instance where they were going to plant a lot of propaganda in the trunk of the car, and then when it exploded, all this propaganda was going to be found. Okay, and so this is something that would have put both governments, in the situation of being against each other, and the CIA just sitting back and laughing because they're the ones who created all this crap,
The editorial below protests the supercilious claims of Cuba, which offends Mexican dignity regarding the mistreatment of Duran as an employee of a Cuban diplomatic installation. It applauds the reaction of the Department of Exterior Relations, which stated that, quote, the fact that Mrs. Duran is an employee of the Cuban consulate does not confer immunity or diplomatic privileges or remove her from the qualified Mexican jurisdiction.
I have to disagree. I have to disagree on that. I believe that as if you're working in an embassy, you know, the definition of an embassy is that you are actually on soil of that country.
That's right. You're right. You're right, Larry. This is a false statement. No question about it.
You know,
and obviously deliberately contrived to justify abusing her.
Yeah, and not only that, it's justifying, you know, where you've got both governments now, you know, against each other, you know, and they're obviously, you know, fighting now in a situation where, you know, albeit where the Mexican government had always been very accommodating, you know, of all of the Cuban exiles and the Cuban Castroites, the people, the Cubans, especially, you know, because that's what the Cuban embassy was in Mexico at the time. Let's not forget that Mexico was one of the few, if not the only country at the time that continued to have diplomatic and economic relationships with Cuba, when most of the other countries, and I'm not saying all of them, but had been pressured by the U.S. to drop, you know, these contacts and these relationships. Okay. Now, going down here, because this is important, because this is the first time that we find actual editorial. This is from the actual newspaper that I found in my research. Okay. And
the editorial also claims that Mexico has supported the Cuban Revolution, tolerating Castro communists, and has not impeded or interfered with their proselytizing activities on Mexican soil. This direct translation reveals the mood of the Mexican people and the reason why the CIA implemented the extensive espionage and counter-espionage apparatus in Mexico City, Lienvoy and Liemti being the two most important projects which facilitated this. Quote, furthermore, allowing considerations that more so we as Mexicans are entitled to, we should point out the protests of many Mexicans over the fact that our government has permitted the passage and residence in our country of innumerable red Cubans who have come here to carry out propaganda and Castro communist agitation, or that, in transit to other countries, the aforementioned undesirable elements with broad permission of our government, that they are not to be bothered and allowed to act freely.
Exactly. And this is, again, you get the, you know, the new stuff here on the new JFK show. Now, this is where I really wanted to get into, because this is where they start to disparage and to really create this legend that Silva Duran was a little putita. And putita.
In the last chapter, Latambel 9 was introduced as the most important penetration agent in the Cuban embassy in Mexico City on behalf of the CIA. As we saw in this chapter, Robert Shaw, aka Lawrence Barker, handled this special agent identified as Luis Alberto, whose identity was of such extreme importance that his 201 file would not be released until after his death.
That's a really important dude.
Fascinating. The reader will recall this file exceeded 1,130 pages and covered his entire career as a spy. From the recently declassified files, we have that on 9 November 1963, Shaw had another one of his late-night clandestine secret meetings.
6 November.
Here is the first page of Shaw's report. Items 2E and 2F below talk about Silvia Duran and is the source of the rumor that regarding Duran would gain her cooperation by getting a desirable male next to her, and she is, according to L9, a little putito, a whore or a slut. Yeah, fascinating, Larry.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Now this I believe is one of the most important documents that we have found on this, because it's November the 6th. Notice the date. Okay, this is
prior to the assassination.
Prior to the assassination, and B, after the supposed shenanigans at the Soviet embassy and Cuban consulate, September the 22nd and October the 1st and 2nd or whatever. Okay, so this is a very, very important meeting here. And what they used to do, this Lita Mil 9, Luis Alberu, this guy was a real superstar spy, you know, and for a long time, he provided the station, the CIA station in Mexico City, with everything that went down in the Cuban consulate and the embassy. This guy was an artist. He was a painter. So he was in the cultural section there. And so he had access, believe it or not, and I think we might have talked about this in the previous show. He even had access to all the pouches coming and going back and forth to Cuba. He even had access to going into the Cubana de Aviación, Cuban Airlines jets, and he would collect magazines and newspapers and bring them back to his handler, Lawrence Baker, who was known, his real name was Robert Shaw, okay? And he would actually deliver all this media so that all this would later on, you know, be delivered to the CIA there in Mexico City, and they would just pour through all this and find out, you know, what was going on in Cuba, because that, you know, we're talking about actual local magazines and newspapers that were left by passengers, you know, you know, when they traveled between Cuba and Mexico City. And not only that, he would go and go and look at what every other employee was doing in their desk, and he would just, you know, scrounge around, you know, and go around and look at what everybody was doing, what they were working on, and he would actually report all this information back to this Lawrence Barker. Now, I just want to show you here, a meeting was held with L9 in B's car from 22 hours. You know what 2200 hours is? That's 10 o'clock at night to 23:45. You know, the car was parked in the like Spana area, and all the meetings are late at night in dark places in a car, you know, because this guy was a real sensitive. He was bringing information back and forth, which was extremely sensitive about everything that went on in the Cuban embassy and the consulate, and he knew everybody. Okay?
Real spy shit, Larry.
Oh yeah. So what Shaw would do here, Jim, he would actually go with a folder with all the pictures that were coming out of the Liemti project, you know, the photo surveillance, and he would say, who's this? And who's this? And he would report and complete the whole picture there for the Mexico City CIA station there for Win Scott. I mean, they were really connected, you know, when they lost this mold. I mean, this guy was real, you know, number one, you know, the mold, the best spy that they had there, you know. And then when you put this together with the Lee Envoy tapes and the wiretapping, you know, it seems like the CIA station in Mexico City, they had all the bases covered, you know. They had holes in there.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and have we ever heard about any of this before, Jim?
No, of course not. Absolutely not.
Never. So this is yeah.
Larry, hold up your hourglass.
Oh, I guess this goes half an hour. When did we start?
That's a whole hour. That's a whole hourglass.
That's an hourglass.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Okay.
Okay.
So, okay, we're almost finished here.
Let's ponder the last sentence of
We'll
item
leave for
F.
next week, you know.
Yeah. No, it's great stuff.
Yeah.
Let's ponder the last sentence of item F above. Shaw, Baker, and Abreu were obviously talking about recruiting or trying to recruit Sylvia Duran.
Okay, this is, but before that, this is what I want you to read right here. I have L9 saw.
But it's very hard for me to make out the letters.
I'll read it. L9, which is Litamil 9, saw Asquith kidding with Sylvia Duran recently in the office, chiding her for being a communist. Sylvia replied, "It's not true. I am not a Stalinist. I have never been interested in party membership. I don't accept the party line, and by talking this way, you are insulting me." That's Sylvia Duran telling him. L9 thinks Sylvia is a very intelligent girl. He thinks we might be able to gain her cooperation by getting a desirable male next to her. She is, according to L9, a little putita.
Which is just complete nonsense.
But what I want here, what I want people to look at here is, he thinks we might be able to gain her cooperation.
So they're going to put like a stud next to her.
Yeah,
When they're talking about gaining her cooperation, you know what that means? They want to recruit her, okay?
Yeah.
And that's why here. So
yeah. Let's ponder the last sentence of item F above. John Barker and Arboru were obviously talking about recruiting or trying to recruit Sylvia Durand before the assassination.
that's right.
In which case she would have been in a perfect position to help support a Lee Oswald visa request to travel to Cuba and the Soviet Union, and in the process serve as witness to these attempts. This, falsely, of course. This dovetails nicely with what Lee Phillips described in his HSCA deposition about pitching every possible Cuban embassy employee when submitted a chronological analysis of Mexico City visit using an imposter, 27 September to 1 October 1963, would predate the 6 November Amru Shah meeting, and both would predate the assassination on 22 November 1963. Durand would not have needed to know any details of the first portion of this operation, which had already occurred and in which he had already been an unwitting participant. The interest in getting Sylvia to cooperate would appear to have been after the fact, where she could go along with a communist seeking a transit visa story, and more importantly, identify Oswald for the record, when the patsy would indeed have to be identified. Unfortunately, we'll never find out if this is the way it happened. However, her personal statement below suggests she was not willing to follow the script. The concept of Durand being recruited before the assassination has probably never been considered before, and is of extreme importance and interest in digesting the above scenario thanks to this asset handler report, which has only now surfaced in the newly declassified document. It is a piece of the puzzle which is entirely feasible and would appear to explain a lot. For example, this author has learned from interested Mexico citizens who have tried to learn about the whereabouts and contact Sylvia Triado Durand that it appears she is shielded and protected by the Mexican government even to this day.
Yeah, that's.
Wow.
Well, you know, Larry, it's fascinating that these documents were withheld because they were hoping no one would show interest in them. It's only you who have been so diligent and responsible in pursuing this, and therefore it would never come to light.
And not only that, it's, you have to have the background on, you know, what is there already, you know, in order to.
Yeah, you have to know so much. This was really a brilliant scheme to keep these to a final or very late release, so that there wouldn't be time and opportunity, and where most persons wouldn't have the background or the ability to track them down and sort them out.
I found that this concept here, which has never ever been touched upon, of where Sylvia, they tried to actually, you know, bring her in, you know, as an asset, as an agent, you know, and we all know that it never happened, you know, and that you know, she just was not willing to go along with it, you know, and that they would pitch her, you know, in that manner. And in a way, you know, the timing, you know, that I'm talking about, November the 6th, before the assassination, you know, it seems like, you know, this whole thing is sort of like being formulated. It's the machinery is cranking here, you know, and
Larry, you're just doing a brilliant job, a dazzlingly good job of sorting this out. I got to tell you, it's wonderful, wonderful stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, that's JFK Show number 255, New Ground Being Broken by Larry Rivera. All right. We'll see you next week, fellas.
all right.